And welcome to season 5, episode 17 of the Senstennial Podcast. Really happy to have you on board here for another episode. Thank you for joining us. And first off, I think we got to talk about the thing we were complaining about in the last video, and that is goaltending. Now, I know Forsberg has been the one mostly getting starts recently, and he's looked damn good. Even in the game against Vegas, where he had an 895 save percentage. There were a couple really grade A chances that he saved, especially there was a breakaway at one point where it wasn't even a half breakaway. It was a full on breakaway. And he stood his ground, saved it, and ended up saving three more breakaways when it came to the shootout. So rock steady is Anton Forsberg lately. And you'll love to see it. So Matt, hit me. What do you like about Forsberg lately? And do you think that it's sustainable?
Well, in that Vegas game, he actually had two breakaway saves in the game and then had three shootout saves, which I definitely think should count towards the save percentage, but that's just me. And then he would have had an above 900 save percentage. But despite that, he had an excellent game. Um, I really didn't have a problem with any of the goals. Some people had a problem with the third goal, but like it's tough when you're moving, and you have to, yeah. Anyways, I think he had a great game. He gives us a chance to win every night that he's in net, and he's showing that he's the starter and that he's the guy. Previous to that, he had easy work against Dallas. And then he was giving us great starts before that as well. Look, I absolutely think it's sustainable because this is what Forsberg has given us previous to this. When we picked him up off of waivers that year, I believe he had like a 917 save percentage, or it was the subsequent year after. I might be muddying those two seasons, but he knows how to play steady Eddie. And I've been on this train the whole time we've had Forsberg. Um, and even around the time when we were considering trading him, I was like, yeah, well, maximize your value, go get somebody in the offseason, da 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 da. But I'm really happy that Forsberg's still around. He does everything just really solid. Um, he's got great leg movement, great glove, as we all saw. He fights through traffic to find the puck on screens. He just does everything really well, and he has the makings of a starting goalie. And some guys don't hit their stride until they're late 20s, and that's kind of when Forsberg started to hit here. So who knows how long if he has a good season this year and it goes into next season, why wouldn't you re-sign him? Especially because we need consistent goaltending.
Yeah, and it's a good point, and especially Mad Sogard, he didn't really take a step this season. He's played
Not
lights
in the
out.
NHL, that's for
No,
sure.
so he's played lights out in the AHL, but of course his little stint in the NHL wasn't so glorious.
Yep.
Mostly not great performances. And hey, listen, I still think that he can be a great goaltender down the road. It's just not his year yet. Still needs more time to marinate, as they say. So once he gets a little more marination going, then maybe he'll be ready for the big leagues. But you're right. I just looked it up. So Forsberg did have a 917 save percentage 2 seasons ago, and last season a 902. This season sitting at 895. But of course, he missed a lot of time due to injuries, so he's only played 20 games so far this season. So
Yeah,
you know,
his save percentage under Jacques Martin though has been a 914.
yeah,
So positivity, baby. It's hard
yeah,
to do with Sens goalies, and obviously our last episode we had just seen a Jonas Corposello masterclass. Um, and now we're getting good goaltending. And I truly believe we could see Forsberg just playing the lion's share of the rest of the season. Knock on wood, he stays healthy, and we can go from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I still think it'll be nice to see Ottawa has some back-to-backs coming up, so it'll be nice to see Korpisalo get some games in my opinion, because regardless of what you think of Korpisalo, and I use that as a general you, not
Yeah,
you
yeah, absolutely.
specifically, I think for him, you have him signed for 4 more years.
Yep.
If you buy him out, you buy him out, fine, and then that's 8 years of salary on the books, but that's neither here nor there. On the books right now, you have him for 4 more seasons. So ideally, so you don't have to buy out that contract, you want him to gain confidence down the stretch. Now
Yep.
that the team is playing a more complete game, especially for a full 60 minutes, giving Korpisalo starts, whether they're just on back-to-backs, still run with Forsberg if he's the one giving you better starts, fine by me. But on those back-to-backs, I know some people were like, "Oh, play Forsberg twice." No, no, no. Let him just, like, ease back into the flow. He's had a lot of damage to the legs over the past year. He could, use some time to get back into the league at a pace that's normal. He doesn't need to be playing back to backs. Let Corpusalo take the back to backs. Hopefully, that lighter workload will help him. He can work with the coaching staff and goaltending coach, of course, away from the rink or at the rink away from game times.
Yeah.
And that is all you can really ask for him. Try to improve, and if he does return to the Sens next season, then hopefully he'll be in a better frame of mind. He'll be more confident because, as we know, goalies can be voodoo, but a lot of it is confidence. And if
Yeah.
that mental game is not there, you could have some great goaltenders who don't play great. And I think we've seen a lot of good goalies this season who have struggled, and I think that that's just because save percentage is down across the league. Goal scoring, of course, is higher in the last couple seasons than it's been before. So you have a bit of balancing that needs to come. And yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
I think you make a really great point, and one of the things that I was kind of shooting around in my head is the idea that maybe you don't give Corpusalo games against bad teams. You give him games against good teams, and I'll tell you why. It gives him an opportunity to have a chip on his shoulder in these types of games, whereas you're going to get burned if you lose against bad teams, but if you lose against a good team, it's not as much. It's a lot of psychology, goaltending is. um and even when I, for example, in beer league, look at going up against the first place team, like there's a lot of psychology that goes into that. If your team isn't shooting on all cylinders and scoring a lot of goals, you're going to be relied upon to win the game. And so goaltending, there's a lot of stuff going on, but you make a great point about confidence and the mentality of the position. And I think giving Corpusalo the opportunity to win in games that probably have a little less importance. I think it's way more important to beat bad teams than it is to beat good teams. If you get what I'm saying, like it makes sense that you lost to the first ranked team, but you shouldn't lose to the 32nd ranked team. Like,
Yeah. No, I hear you. And speaking of rankings, Matt, is there something you want to talk about?
we are not last in the Atlantic Division anymore.
Woo!
We have climbed out of the basement, baby. The Habs are in our rear view. The Sabres, we got our eyes on you, and we're coming. We're
We
coming.
coming. Watch out. As soon as the danger flutes come back, watch out.
Yeah, what okay, let's talk about that for a little bit. What is going on? Why are the danger flutes gone? Why did somebody think Hell's Bells was the way to go?
I mean, not a bad jam, to be honest,
Sure,
but
fair.
danger flutes are iconic. You can't just
Yeah,
get rid of those.
you
But
keep bringing back Lyndon Slewage and everybody loves it. There's a reason. Nostalgia.
yeah, Jacques Martin,
Yeah.
nostalgia,
Daniel Alfredson,
nostalgia.
nostalgia. Whenever there's an Eric Carlson rumor, nostalgia.
Oh man, I don't think I could survive another Eric Carlson trade deadline deal,
Oh God.
especially
I
one involving the Sens. Just I
yeah.
can't. I can't do it
Yeah.
again. Emotionally
Yeah.
draining.
And I think we'll probably talk about the deadline shortly. But on a positive note, Matt, I don't know about you, but it has been lovely to see increased production from the core of these Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, I'll jump on this bad boy. I think last time we talked, there were a couple players we had some qualms with, and one of
Yeah.
those was Josh Norris. Now, since we recorded our last video, I believe Josh Norris has had 3 points, or sorry, 4 points in 3 games. So we didn't cover. Our last podcast came before the Tampa game, so I guess
Yeah.
actually technically 4 games. He's had 4 points, but all four came in the last 2 games. Hope you followed that. But anyway, no, he has looked better. He's been playing better, which is obviously what you want to see. Doing well in the face-off department, and it seems like he's getting some of his mojo back. Now, the thing with Norris this season is he tends to be a bit streaky. He'll, you know, score a few points, and then he'll disappear from the score sheet for a handful of games. So he's a guy who I'd like to see continue this and not have it just be a hot flash, but actually be this is kind of what you're getting, especially with a guy who's paid nearly $8 million. And we'll get to trade rumors a little later on, but obviously that kind of factors into this because there's been some trade rumors surrounding Josh Norris. But the other player who I wanted to bring up is Thomas Chabot. Last time we talked about him, he was having a bit of a drought, but now in the last 4 games since we recorded, he has 5 points, 3 straight games with goals. He's looked really good, and I've been very impressed. If you had asked me at the beginning of the season which defender I thought should be traded first of the big three on the left side, it probably would have been Shabbat. I would have preferred Chikrin. At this point in the season, I prefer Shabbat. I think I would trade Chikrin over Shabbat if that's what management decides they want to do is to trade one of those left-hand defensemen. I saw somebody, can't remember which social media platform, but they kind of hypothesized about a Chikrin for Rasmus Anderson swap, or a package built around swapping those two
Wow.
players. And I thought that was really interesting. Ottawa could obviously use a right-hand defenseman who can play top 4 minutes. Rasmus Anderson's the same age as Shabbat. You know, for Calgary, they would be getting Chikrin, who's obviously a couple years younger, and they need more left-hand defensemen. He could really help their top four, so it kind of seems like a win-win. But who knows? It's just something that I've seen someone hypothesize. I'm not saying I'm for or against it. Don't want to get roasted on here, but just something that I thought was interesting to consider. But yeah, so all that to say, Shabbat and Norris have really stood out in the last 5 games, and it's nice. I mean, it's kind of funny that I find whenever we criticize a player, all of a sudden the next 5 games they're like, "All right, I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna show these idiots." You know, so Shabbat and Norris have definitely done that. But hey, I'll throw it over to you and get your takes on what you've seen and whether you're impressed or not by these guys and how they're playing.
I think not only is it Josh Norris's offensive output that we're seeing improved, but it's also his game just everywhere, away from the puck, with the puck, making passes, being available in tight and all of that. He looks like a different player than he was 5 games ago. Heck, even before the Tampa game. Um, I felt in the Tampa game that he looked quite good, but he, didn't get on the score sheet, I don't believe, or if he got an assist. And then, was able to look really good in the last couple of games, and most recently getting a nice tip goal to put the Sens on top against the Knights before they tied it. I think he's playing really good hockey. And I also noticed, and I haven't personally noticed this, but Norris was on the penalty kill at some point, and I don't really know if I've seen him there at all this season. And that's just me, but it was nice to see him out there because I feel like he used to be there, and hasn't been recently. But if you're making sure players need to improve defensively, putting them out on the PK is a hell of a way to, feed them to the sharks essentially. And you tell him sink or swim. And I feel like he's doing that. And in reference to Thomas Chabot, I was on record that said like the guy that is going to benefit the most from Jacques Martin is Thomas Chabot, and it's happening in spades. He looks like the player that he was a couple of years ago. He's making smart decisions. He's strong in his own zone. He's scoring. All of that is just what Thomas Chabot does and what we're used to. And a lot of people, were harping on him, rightfully so, for his down year. But we had an expectation that this guy is a top pairing defenseman, and he's showing that he is yet again. Um, and I agree. Like if you had to pick a Shabbat or a Chikrin, I'm picking Shabbat all day to keep. And Chikrin's going. And if a deal like Chikrin for Rasmus Anderson, and if Ottawa had to include more, I would do that because that addresses a direct need. Bringing in Chikrin was a great idea. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't a right shot defenseman. And we need that. And Rasmus Anderson is a right shot defenseman and does a lot of things really well. And like with Calgary, there's a lot of stuff, that a lot of moving parts for them. And I feel like they're at the precipice of blowing it all up, getting rid of Jacob Markstrom, getting rid of Noah Hannafin, getting rid of Chris Tanev. Like their decor could look completely different. And if you have a conversation with them, say, hey, if you're getting rid of Anderson, I can give you something of value back that helps now and for the future. So yeah, I like that idea of a deal, but who knows what's going on.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think we need to, before we get to the trade deadline discourse, realize that players who have more contract left, and in this case, Chikrin has another season, and I believe Rasmus Anderson also has one more season. Those are deals that don't necessarily get done in season. It might be something that happens in the off season. I know Ottawa acquired Chikrin last trade deadline. I think Dorian said at the time that with the way the Sens were playing, he figured that they
He
wouldn't
wanted to
necessarily be.
reward them
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't think they were anticipating being buyers of pending UFAs, but in a case like that where Chikrin had, the rest of the season with the Sens that year and then 2 years left on his deal, that made more sense, which I agree.
Yep.
I think at the time we were blown away, we were so excited. I feel like the health of Chikrin has impressed me.
Yeah.
And like knock on wood, but he's played every game this season, and that's been extremely impressive. At the same time, he hasn't brought the same star power that I saw from him when I watched him like I didn't watch Arizona games religiously, but
Yeah.
when I did watch, he was a guy who you noticed when he was on the ice. And sometimes watching Sens games, he's not that noticeable like he was in Arizona. And I'm not sure if that's a systems thing, a confidence thing, what it is. Defensively, he's looked weaker than what he was doing with Arizona. And I don't know if that's just because he was more relied upon or what. There could be a variety of factors. But I guess for him, it's been a bit disappointing. And I guess we'll see. If he is dealt, the clock is a ticking here because the trade deadline is about a week and a half away.
Yeah, and I think he looked good earlier this season, and then his play kind of got muddy, and his like his ability in his own zone has been probably the biggest letdown for me, anyways. Haven't loved a lot of what he's been doing, but I think he's a good defenseman, and he has the ability to bounce back. If it's on our team, great. If it's not, and he brings in something of value, I'm also happy about that too. So, all in all, I guess we're gonna have to see how things shake out, especially if especially if the Senators end up going on some interesting Forsbergler type run.
Well, on that note, geez, all of a sudden my throat dried up there.
I
Let's
left you speechless.
let's talk about this year's trade deadline.
Yep.
So, first on the list I want to talk about is least exciting player who could be on the move and the return that Ottawa would get for them. And then we'll move up maybe in
Yeah.
anticipated value.
So you tell me a name and I tell you a value.
The one, the only former Red Wing, Dominic Kubalik.
Oh,
Now,
tough.
before I get you to chip in, I will say I didn't realize how bad the scoring drought. And I don't mean just goal scoring. I mean like assists as well. The drought has been rough for Kubalik. In the last 16 games, guess how many points he has?
Uh, z- actually, it's the last 16.
Yep,
Oh, I'm gonna say like 4.
one.
Ooh, that's real bad.
One goal against the
Oof.
Calgary Flames back on January 9th. So it's been a tough 2024 for Kubalik. He has in total points in 2024, he has 2 points.
Yeah,
So
it's tough. That's
it's
tough.
it's tough. And, I don't know when he was a part of the package coming back for DeBrincat, I was like, "Okay, he'll
Yep.
be like a third line depth scorer." He has been basically invisible. And I don't mean to trash the guy, like, it's just it is extremely underwhelming what he has brought to the club. And
Yeah.
I'm not surprised to see Jacques Martin's had him as a healthy scratch one game. He's almost always playing fourth line minutes now. Jacques Martin, for to the media, even said that he needs to work on his game away from the puck. And when the Sens acquired him, looking at the analytics, you could see that defensively he is not a player that excels at that part of the game. So I'll flip it to you now. Obviously, I kind of just criticized
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of his
You
game,
that's okay.
but what do you think that Ottawa could actually get from a player like Dominic Kubalik?
I think you have to look at Kubalik as like you just look at him as the player because Ottawa does have the ability to retain 1.25 million in cap, and if you are going to get value back, I think that's the only way. You sell. He's been playing on our fourth line because he's been struggling to crack what we have as is a strong top nine. Um, and if there's a team that's requiring scoring, you say like even with crappy assignments, he's still got. I think he's got like 8 or 9 goals or something like that.
He has currently registered 9 goals.
Okay. So you can sort of say something to that effect. He's got crappy assignments and he's still put up 9 goals. And we will retain half of his salary, and you give us a 6th or a 7th round pick, and that's it. Um, yeah, because I don't think Kubalik has much value whatsoever, and you just hope the GM doesn't watch Ottawa games, or you hope anybody is not watching Ottawa games to hyper focus in on his play.
I think some GMs potentially would give up a sixth or seventh, especially with retained salary.
Yep.
But I think it would truly depend on the situation. Like if you have a responsible line defensively, but they maybe need a guy who can score
Yeah.
potentially, then you
Yeah.
could put Kubalik on that line and he likely won't be that much of a detriment. Other GMs may play off the fact that he had a pretty good season last year and that he could bounce back into form on a better roster because despite the Sens playing much better, he's still playing on their fourth line. He's still on a team that standings wise are in the bottom of the NHL. So that could be how a GM views it. I'm not going to get my hopes up, but I think that that's a realistic return. Let's talk about the next guy. And this is one who I'll reserve my comments on for now. I want to get your opinion. They're a pending RFA left-handed defenseman Eric Brandstrom. Now, there's been a lot of discussion in the market over whether a player who is undersized as a defenseman can be an asset when it comes to playoff time. So I'm going to ask you, do you think Eric Brandstrom gets moved? And if he does, what do you think the return could be?
I think anybody should look at Eric Brandstrom as a guy who is underperforming in whatever situation he's being put in. And underperforming is actually the wrong word. I think he is like undervalued on our team. And I think if you give him the opportunity to play left with a solid right shot defenseman, he's going to flourish. I think Eric Brandstrom does have the capability of being a top four defenseman, especially if he's not like the net clearer, so to speak. But he does like most of the things really quite well. And I think that in his defensive zone, I take Brandstrom over Chikrin any day. And that's kind of sad to say, but it is what it is. Um, with that said, I think I look at like Dallas trading for Niels Lundqvist a couple of years ago, or Lundqvist. I don't want to screw up any um, way it's said, but I look at how they acquired him a couple of years ago, and he just couldn't crack it in New York, and I know he's kind of struggled. And I want to say he
quick
acquired.
little quick little
Yeah, I
Google
want
search.
to know what happened.
We'll play some
Um,
elevator music while you do this.
yeah, da, 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 da,
Or
da,
the
da,
stock
da.
Cisco music when you're put on hold.
Because I remember the trade. I just want to know what he was acquired for. And generally speaking, we don't do this. I try really hard to have everything, available within
Sometimes
my.
though, off the cuff comparisons. Gotta do what you
Yeah.
gotta do.
So the Rangers at the time received a conditional uh uh they received a conditional first and a in 2023 and a conditional fourth in 2025.
What were the
Um,
conditions?
if the Stars' own first round pick in 2023 is the top 10, New York will get Dallas's own first round selection in 2024. So I believe they did get Dallas's pick. Um, so that's like I look at that trade as like a Brandstrom makeup, and he's not going to get a first round pick. I know that. But I believe that Brandstrom, still being an RFA, has the ability to bring in a third and quite possibly a second, because he's an analytics darling, and he passes the eye test. If people really want to get rid of him, fine. He's still good. He's obviously playing behind Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot, and Jacob Chikrin. But if he's playing in the right situation, like I look at Arizona, for example, and like that's a guy they should buy low on, and like he'll give him a solid partner and just watch him flourish. And that's why I don't want to let him go, because I still think he has a lot of opportunity. And just gonna put it out there, like uh Scott Niedermayer was not tall.
That is quite the comparison. But no,
I'm just saying he was a small defenseman,
yeah,
and he was like a god tier. So you don't need to be tall to succeed.
yeah, I agree with that. And I think a lot of the time people totally forget, like when I see people bring up, oh, when it comes to playoff time, a smaller guy can't compete. And, Mark Mathod said that you need to have bigger guys. And I know, fine, Mark Mathod did play in the NHL. So sure, he has maybe some authority on the matter. But at the same time, let's not forget that Mark Mathod had an undersized defenseman on the Sens playing, on third pairing minutes in Chris Weidman. He is listed as the same height as Eric Brandstrom, and he played the entire 3 rounds of that 2017 run with the Ottawa Senators. I didn't hear a single person at that time complain about Chris Weidman other than maybe defensive mishaps, but I never saw complaining about his size when he was on the Sens back in 2017. And I still don't understand where this argument emerged from. Uh, Analytically on defense, aside from Sanderson and Zub, Eric Brandstrom's the best defender the Sens have. If we're talking about being able to clear the net or what have you, when have you ever watched Travis Hamonic stop something in front of the
Or
net?
quite frankly, Jacob Chikrin. I'm
No,
not
exactly.
trying to
But
pick
like,
on the guy.
no, but seriously, like, yes, every once in a while they do something that's a really nice defensive play. I'll give them that. But like, it shouldn't be every game that you're watching Travis Hamonic in the defensive end. You're like, and getting a little like uptight about what's going to happen. And Brandstrom can play the right side. He played the right side against Vegas when uh, he was paired with Chabot, and he played really well. He ended up putting up an assist, and I believe, yeah, he had about 18 minutes of ice time. So Jacques Martin obviously trusts him. And good for him. I'm glad that Branstrom's taking advantage of a new coach who is trying to put some faith into him, be like, look it, you're playing well. I'll give you top line assignment with Thomas Chabot. Go out there and show me what you can do. So I think whatever team acquires him, like you said, will probably be buying low, if you will, even though he's a really solid two-way defender. And yeah, that's all I really say. Like it just baffles me sometimes when people criticize small defensemen. You even have a guy like Torrey Krug, who with the Blues nearly won a Stanley Cup with the Blues, and he was their one of their best defenders in that run. Um, like I was going to use Sam Girard as an example, but I think he's had some injury issues, so he hasn't played as many playoff games. But that hasn't deterred Colorado from putting some phenomenal regular seasons together and then having good playoff runs. And he's produced well in the lineup when not injured. But all that to say, I'm getting really sidetracked. I think I agree with you that if Brandstrom was potentially dealt at the deadline, I think that Ottawa could get a second or maybe at worst a third round draft pick.
Yeah, and I think, maybe Brandstrom has a conversation with Martin and says, "Hey, let's I'm happy to play the right side for a bit. Like, let's see what we have there." And, maybe he continues to show that he should play there, and they keep an asset that has been solid for them for the last 2 seasons. But what do I know? Whatever, I guess.
All right, well, let's get to the star of the show, and I think everyone is knows who this player is, and that's Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, this season with the Sens, he's had quite a good year. He's put up 37 points in 53 games. 15 of those are goals. So obviously, he still has his scoring touch. Obviously, not as hot as he was in his 20s when it comes to scoring, but I had to clarify, just in case. But, he's still got it. He's still got that nice little touch, and I think that any team who is looking for goal scoring on their second or third line going into the playoffs would take a long look at Tarasenko. And so, yeah, on that note, Tarasenko, what do you think he could get for the Sens? And that's really it. What do you
Yeah,
think he
I
can get for the
think
Sens?
Tarasenko, I guess the assumption is that he's going to be retained completely, or like at 50%. And I think you would be dumb not to, if you are going to trade him. You absolutely retain half of his salary, because it's what, 2 months or something like that left after the trade deadline. So why not? Um, and then I look at his production. He's having a pretty solid year, as on his above 30 seasons. And I think I've seen crazier things happen, but like, when it's going to come down to it, I think we're going to see that like Tarasenko is going to bring in a first round pick.
Yeah, I agree. And I know that there's been some rumors floating around, like a second round pick and Brisson for Tarasenko. I
I also
think,
don't think Ottawa is ever trading with Vegas again.
yeah,
I
I
think
know. That's,
Andlauer will like 100% kibosh that.
yeah. Or be like, hey, if you want this player so bad, you got to up your price. We want a first round pick back because you took one from us. We want one back, baby. So yeah. But he's a guy who he produces really well in the playoffs. and that's the kind of guy that any team would want to have on their run. I remember in the offseason we were talking about value and how much a player would want versus how much they would produce. And at the time, it was the two remaining free agents who I guess had the most scoring potential were Thomas Tatar and Vladimir Tarasenko. And for defensive value alone, Tatar was the better choice. But as we saw, he was traded to Seattle partway through the season. And obviously, it looks like Ottawa picked right because
Yeah.
Tarasenko has shown up on the scoreboard. Analytically, he hasn't been a defensive darling, but he manages to keep more pucks out of the net on the defensive side than what he's helping contribute on the offensive side, and that's great to see. And that's all you can really ask for a scoring winger. So happy that he's on the Sens. I would honestly be fine if Ottawa extended him. However, my dream scenario would be if he loves the city so much and he is willing to extend, pitching him the idea of like, "Hey, we're gonna send you a contender. You can go see how it goes, like try and win a cup, what have you. It'll give us an asset or two. We'll bring you back in the off season, or we'll chat with your agent in the off season, or whatever is not interference. And then in the off season, go to him and be like, hey, did you like playing in Ottawa? This is what we're thinking of doing. Sales pitch of like, this is a different management team. We're gonna have a different path going forward and what we think will improve this roster. And we really think 2024 will be the year that we make the playoffs. We want you to be a part of that and see what he does. The elevator pitch, Shark Tank pitch, Dragon's Den, whatever you got to do. Okay. So that's what I think. But I agree with you that I think a first round pick should be the asking price and that the Sens should be able to get it, even if it ends up being a conditional, or if it's a conditional second that turns into a first, depending on how far a team goes in the playoffs, something like that.
Yeah, definitely, especially considering like Jake Gensel, if he does get traded, he's going to be the belle of the ball. But whatever team misses out on him, Tarasenko will be the immediate, you're the guy. Let's you, me, you, me, you, me, you. So um I I I have no doubt that he'll get a first, and who knows, like if it is a second that's coming back, I think it has to be a solid prospect that suddenly becomes our ranked number one prospect because we are not good at that. So we need to keep some first round picks.
Yeah, not going to disagree with you there. I also will say because Gensel's on the long-term injured reserve, that really helps Tarasenko's case because again, knock on wood, he's been
Yeah,
extremely healthy this season
yeah,
and has shown that that shoulder ain't going to slow him down. And I believe the
yeah.
only time he missed games this season was for personal family related reasons. It wasn't due to injury. So he's a guy who has been healthy the whole year and could definitely step into a lineup and produce. And it seems like guys in the locker room absolutely love him despite maybe some
Yeah.
semi-disparaging comments on social media that were circulating. So I think that he's definitely a guy that will be on teams' radars. Now, one player whose name came up, and I said we were going to mention this, was Josh Norris. Now, like we talked about earlier, past couple games, he's looked quite good, but his name pops up in the rumor mill as the Sens not shopping him actively, but they've taken calls on him and have listened to those calls. So obviously, a Josh Norris trade very unlikely to happen in the season, especially with a week and a half till the deadline. But do you think that is a trade that could potentially take place in the summer, if at all? And what would your ideal scenario be, or a fair assessment of what the value would be in a trade involving Josh Norris?
I currently say, listen to hear what his market value is, and that's the gist of it. You go into the off season, you make sure he is training and practicing all summer because he did not have that luxury last season or last off season. Have him come in and see what you have in that player. But I'm not entertaining Josh Norris trades right now, especially when people are trying to like package him for UC Saros, and I was like, it's not happening. So just let it go. And yeah, if we decided to trade him, um, it would be because you got an offer that kind of knocked your socks off. That is sort of above his value as a 35 goal scorer. So it would probably include a couple, like at least a first, an A tier prospect, and probably a player that can play now. But I don't expect any sort of Josh Norris trade to be realistic anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind. I'd like to see him come back next season after being healthy for full off season. Because I don't know if you remember this past off season, but it was like, oh yeah, Josh Norris is going to be ready for training camp, and then training camp came and went, and he wasn't ready, and then he didn't start the regular season. Like it was kind of weird, and then finally it was like, okay, he's good. And so I would like to see him with a full summer of being healthy and doing off-season training and coming back next season, seeing what he can do. Kind of like Drake Batherson, who I know he has also had some downtime this year, but ultimately, when he came back 100% from his injury, he was playing at a much better level. And I think Josh Norris could do that too. That said, I'm of the opinion that due to his contract, it wouldn't hurt to kind of see what's out there and what people are offering for Josh Norris. He's still quite young. He's got a lot of road ahead of him. He's locked into that contract for a number of years, so any team acquiring him wouldn't have to worry about only having him for a season or two. And yeah, so it's definitely very interesting, but agree. If he does get dull, it's not happening at the deadline. It's going to be a summer conversation, and then the talks will probably last a while. So on that note, is there any player that we haven't talked about who you think could be a surprise player to be moved at the deadline, or at least come up in trade discussions?
I mean, I guess the only one that we have talked about that we haven't talked about is Jacob Chikrin. Like he's the guy that I'm sure some people would call about because he's a defenseman that, and a lot of teams need a good defenseman. So if you got an offer that knocked your socks off, then go off. But obviously, you with a Chikrin deal, you probably want to make a hockey trade.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's not like he's had a garbage season. Like he has 30 points in 55 games. Obviously, as we mentioned, his defensive game has been a little suspect this year, and that was the biggest issue, in my opinion, anyway, of his game. Also, I was anticipating he'd have a little bit more production on the power play, but sadly, it's like he's had some production, obviously, but he hasn't had as much of an impact on the power play as I would have liked to have seen, which is a little sad. But it is what it is. And yeah, really, I just was hoping that he could step up. He didn't. And hopefully, if anything happens in the offseason, it's a win win trade for the Sens. But I agree. I don't think he's going at the deadline. It's worth a call, I'm sure, from other GMs, but I think it ends at that.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
On that note, thank you so much, everyone, for watching or listening to today's episode. We really appreciate it. And if you like our shenanigans, please follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at Senstennial. We're on Instagram at the Senstennial. We're on Reddit as well at the Senstennial. And you can find myself, Matt, and Bennett, who could join us today, all on Twitter as well. So thank you so much for watching or listening. And trade deadline's coming up. And next Monday, we have a guest joining us to talk a little bit about what they think could happen at the deadline for the Ottawa Senators. So stay tuned for that. And we'll talk to you then, I guess, kind of.
Go Sens, go.
Go Sens, go, baby.